Welcome everybody to MiSCA 2021. It's going to be another awesome year of mountain biking in Michigan with our kids. And I'm excited to be able to kick it off with tonight's meeting. If you're unaware of who I am, my name is Sean Warren. I am the executive director and the race director for MiSCA. Previously, I've been with MiSCA since 2012, and I was on the board of directors and since 2012. And recently have taken an employee position with the organization as our first employee. So we're excited about that. As we have to do more things year round, it just has taken up more and more of my time. And therefore it just made sense to do that now. As we move forward, I see us expanding that and increasing how many people we need to have around on our staff. Annually, we have a staff of 2. It's me and Sarah Vano. Sarah does our registration. So if you ever email registration@MiSCA Bike, you'll get Sarah. I also see those emails, so you might get a reply from me. But otherwise, feel free. My email's at the end of this PowerPoint. So feel free to email me if you ever have any questions as well. So a little bit about what the agenda is for tonight. We're going to go over our mission, our history, and our growth. Our league structure for kind of how we're structured as an annual organization, some initiatives that are happening now in MiSCA, go through our current teams and kind of how our team structure works, some rule changes for the year and race category changes. That's usually the kind of the hot topics of the meeting. We'll go through our race schedule and our fees, which also race schedule changes every year, but our fee structure has also changed a little bit this year. To be more simplified. A real quick snippet on COVID precautions, which is very early right now. A call for volunteers, and then open it up for just general Q&A. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to throw them into the chat box of Zoom. And if I don't get to them right away, I will try to do it at the end, and by myself managing the session today. So I might not be able to get to them all right away. So the chat will be the easiest place, and I can always download that and I can get with you after the meeting if we need to. So let's jump in a little bit about our mission, our history, and our growth, just so you understand kind of what MiSCA is all about and where we came from. So we updated our mission this year, and basically the gist of it is that we're empowering communities to develop and grow K-12 youth mountain biking programs. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're doing just that. And our goal is to get new programs and teams developed across the state. And so a lot of times when people think of MiSCA, they think of racing. And that's not necessarily our primary focus, although it's one of the more fun things that we do throughout the year. It's the culmination of our year-long effort of getting more kids on bikes, riding with teams and with more kids. So when we were founded in 2010, that's all we did was races. And then in 2018, we started our coach programming, and then allowing teams to form underneath of MiSCA, which we'll cover in our league structure discussion. But really what we want to instill into our coaches is that we're promoting the values of an active lifestyle, healthy competition, outdoor stewardship, and then also that, these kids are building lifelong friendships when they're in their teams and their clubs. And we always strive for an inclusive environment as well. Typically teams have all ages, all genders, and we never want to be exclusive of any group that wants to mountain bike. And we're trying to be more inclusive and reach out to communities that don't necessarily bike generally. We're also proud to share that we are a gold level of transparency on GuideStar, and we were a 2020 top rated nonprofit on Great Nonprofits. Great Nonprofits is kind of like Google reviews or Yelp for nonprofits. And then GuideStar is more about your 501c3 status and how transparent you are with your metrics. And then what we actually provide as an organization, first is youth-focused programming. And first on that is our mountain biking race series, which is for all K-12 student athletes. We host skills camps and clinics. We have initiatives to gain more female participation. We have a student leadership council. In addition to those youth focus programs, we also have coaching curriculum and guidance. So we develop coaching curriculum for all student abilities. We have a certification program for our coaches and also provide the training to be certified. And then we practice safe biking and safe kids principles. Safe biking more along the lines of, IMBA and just in general, wearing helmets and things like that, but also safe kids when it comes to adults working with our kids. And then really what it comes down to is we're developing a statewide network of support. So whether it's our creation of a coach advisory committee that allows all of our coaches to talk and share best practices, or if it's just help and guidance of starting a new club and helping other teams to grow. That is what we're here for. In some quick history, we were founded in 2010 under the umbrella of the Michigan Mountain Biking Association. We didn't have our 501c3 status at that time. So typically what new nonprofits will do is kind of form underneath of an existing, and that's what we did. They helped us out a lot, gave us a trailer and some bikes, and we were off. In 2012, we did get our 501c3 status. And we've maintained that since then and gone through all the proper regulations to prove that we deserve that status. In 2014, we shifted to 100% student-only races. Prior to that, we had hosted our races alongside the adult promoters with kind of having MiSCA awards at the end of the day, youth categories in an adult race. We found that going to youth only or student only races really helped us to grow and also to focus on the kids. And sometimes there's a lot of things that happen at adult races that can be a distraction. And it's not necessarily always a family-friendly environment. So we strive to create that in all of our races and events. In 2016, we expanded to the west side of the state with our first race at Cannonsburg Ski Area, and I've continued to do races on the west side since then. And now we do 2 races a year in the Grand Rapids area. We've done races in Kalamazoo as well. 2018 is when we started that league model that I mentioned in our coach certification program, which really allowed our growth. And you'll see that, I believe, on the next slide, where we really have taken off since we started that. The idea of not just being a race series, but being more support to let the sport grow. In 2020, we were still here. Last year, we were able to still run our organization. We had to impose many limits on what we could do, and those were imposed upon us mostly. But a lot of the things that we did helped us to maintain participation because people felt safe coming to our events and they knew that we were going to enforce the rules. And we're pretty proud that we were able to do what we did last year, even with the limitations that were put in place. And I don't know of any other mountain bike race that happened last year. I'm trying to remember. I think one might have happened in October or November. But we were basically it as it came to mountain biking last year. And we're just for kids. So it's pretty cool that we're able to do that. So a recap of 2020, just real quick. We had 717 students join a team or at least sign up to race. That's up from 501 students the year prior. So it's a pretty big increase for us, much more than expected. We had 340 average racers at each race, and that's down from 351. That was due to our restrictions of how many riders we could have at a race. We started at 325 as our maximum allowed, and then we increased that for, I believe, the last 3 races to 376. So it kind of averaged out to that 340. And then we had 6 races throughout Michigan. And to do all of that, we were supported by 252 certified coaches. That's up from 200 coaches the year prior. All of our coaches complete background checks and concussion training. And combined MiSCA coaches have logged, or they typically log around 8,000 hours per year of volunteer work. And that's just what gets logged. I know there's a lot more time that gets put in that does not get logged. We had 42 of those coaches were registered as ride guides. That's typically your ride leader of any group in your club or your team. They have to complete first aid, CPR, skills training and complete 40 hours of working with the team before they can be certified as a level 2 coach. And then we had 32 level 3 coaches, which are skills coaches, and they have to do the same idea, the same first aid and CPR. They have to do an increased level of skills training, and then they also do 60 total hours of team activity to maintain that coaching level. Okay, so this is the chart that I wanted to show. And I have another slide that I'm excited to show as well. But this is our growth since 2018. 2018 is when we implemented the coach programming and the idea of having teams and clubs underneath of MiSCA. And you can kind of see where the numbers have gone since then. You can also see the slight dip in 2020 from 19 when it comes to racing. Just a quick, to explain, the top bright red line is our just total number of riders. So how many people are joining MiSCA annually? And you can see kind of where we plan to end 2021. And then the black line is race registration. This is average numbers per race. Typically we peak out at about 50 to 100 more riders per race at our peak, and then it averages out a little bit lower. And then this red line that's pretty consistent at the bottom is for our coach registration. So while we had tons more riders in 2020, a lot of those new riders didn't really come with coaches. And that's pretty typical. Parents typically their first year, they don't necessarily sign up to coach, but then they fall in love with MiSCA and they'll sign up for the following year. So I expect we'll be over this number, but I try to keep things conservative in my estimates. So pretty good growth over the last 3 years. We're excited about that growth. And it was, again, every year we're it's unexpected. And which is a good problem to have, but yeah, we're excited for where we've been. And this is where we came from. So in 2010, when we started, we had about 40 riders at a race, and that stayed pretty consistent through 2012. And that's when I joined the league here in 2012 on the board. Slight growth. And then we pretty much stayed consistent for a few years. We had a little bit of turmoil in these years where we weren't really sure if we were going to do it or not. And so we got late starts sometimes to our season. I took over as the president at late 15, I believe. So I had all of 2016 to kind of under me to do the work. And my real goal is to make things consistent. MiSCA is going to be around next year and start planning basically a year in advance. And that really paid off for us in 2017. And you can see this is average race registrations. And typically in these years, we've been increasing the number of races that we do as well. So in 2017, I think we had 5 races, same in 8. I think in 18, we went up to 6 possibly. It might've been 19, we did 6 for the first time. Can't remember exactly. But I think just being consistent and people knowing that we're going to be around and planning far in advance allowed us to grow big. And then from then on, we've continued to grow just by helping to stoke the flames of the club and team atmosphere throughout the year that then culminates in that race season. And you can see how the growth annually has just spiked. Even if the race line doesn't go in the same trajectory, and that's okay. We really just want to get more kids on bikes. If they come to the races, that's great, but we want them to ride with the teams and have fun and learn new skills, and that's really what we think is important about MiSCA and why people love it. All right, so a little bit about our league structure. Okay, so basically MiSCA is kind of the parent organization that all of the teams and coaches and riders will fall under. Sorry about that. Dogs with people at the door. So basically a team will register to be part of MiSCA, and then coaches and adult volunteers will register to be part of a team. And student athletes will also register to be part of that team. These boxes are kind of just to show volume. So, there's only one MiSCA. There's like 20 teams and then, 300 coaches and 800 riders. So as you go down in this, there's just more bulk of how many people are in those boxes. In general, a team needs at least one level 2 or 3 coach at every team event. And every team has to have one level 3 coach. And then as far as student athletes go, we recommend highly that you have at least one coach per 6 students. And that's in a ride group. So if you have if you have 2 different ride groups, you should have 4 coaches basically, but you'd have, 2 coaches for every 12 students is typically kind of like what a ride group might be. And then that number might go up. So typically a lot of the newer coaches will sweep a ride group, and that's great. And then you'll have a ride guide as part of that group as well, who's been trained on kind of what to do if an emergency happens and has the first aid training to be able to handle any injuries that might happen on the trail. And then students are not required to join a team to participate in MiSCA events, but they are required to join MiSCA. So while this is hierarchical in that, everyone's part of the teams, it's not necessarily the case. Not every coach is part of a team and not every student is part of a team. And that's just, some coaches are starting new teams or feeling it out and getting their sea legs a bit. And some students don't have teams in their area. So we would love you to start a team. If you don't have one in your area, it can start small and then grow from there. And then, as it grows, you'll get more parents that want to ride with the team to help you out. Okay, so if you're on the call and you're thinking about starting a team, these are kind of the steps you would take. First is there is an annual registration process through our SportsSignUp Play application, and there is a fee involved. It's $150, and that basically covers you under our insurance, and then also makes you eligible for team awards throughout the year. Then coaches, if you're not muted, if you could mute your line, that would be good. Unless you have a question, then feel free to write it in the chat box. And I will try to address it. Coaches and riders then register to join a team, and the team registration is open today. So if you want to start a new team right now, you can go to miscabike.org/register, and you can sign your team up to be official. And you can also visit miscabike.org/resources for a sample team budget. There's also tips on how to get your team started. So there's some webinars that were recorded a couple years back from some of our successful teams on how to start a new team, and then also to manage a growing team when you have 100 kids coming to you every couple times a week, how to manage that process to make it smooth. Especially in times of COVID, there's a lot more things you have to do as a coach than we used to have to do. And then if you're interested in becoming a coach, if you want to be a level 1 coach, which is basically the kind of the entry level, if you want to be able to volunteer at all with a team, you become a level 1 coach. You do have to register annually, and there is a fee of $30. I know I have gotten pushback on that before, like we're asking volunteers to pay money. Really, for us, that just reimburses us for the cost of the background check and for processing, you into our system. Maybe a little bit of insurance too. The background checks are about $25, so there's a little bit in there for insurance and just processing. So basically, you're just covering the cost of you joining as a member. That's all we're asking you to do. You do have to be 18 years old. You do have to complete the background check and review an online concussion training and pass a quiz. And then you should be attending this webinar, which is also free. So any new coaches that aren't here today, we ask them to watch this so they understand what MiSCA is all about and kind of what the processes are of joining a team and riding with the team, which we'll cover momentarily. And you can see the full details of this at miscabike.org/coach. And again, registration is open today. So you can register right now if you want to be a level 1 coach. There's no prerequisite that you have to do other than going to miscabike.org/register. You can do everything you need to do right there on that site. That's where the concussion training and all that stuff is already at, and the background check. Now, to be a level 2 coach, we would expect this to be like your second year of coaching with MiSCA. And you have to do all the same requirements as level 1. So you do have to register annually. You must be 21 years old to be a level 2. You have to report 30 hours. So this should be, I think the previous slide was wrong where it said 40, but now I can't remember, but but you have to report field hours. So when I mentioned there was 8,000 hours a year, that's where our coaches are reporting their hours. You do have to pass a first aid CPR certification. We require an in-person certification. So kind of the cheap, like $20 online certifications don't count. It is the kind of more expensive one, but we feel that's very important for our coaches to go through a full training. You'd review a ride guide webinar and pass a quiz, and then attend a ride leading coaches clinic. Everything in there is free. So except for the external things like the first aid CPR. So anything you do with MiSCA, once you're a coach, we don't charge you more for. So attending a clinic or anything like that, you don't get charged. And again, full details are at miscabike.org/coach, and you can register today. So if you meet those criteria, you can go ahead and go to miscabike.org/register to sign up. Now, a question that may come up here is that there is no ride leading coaches clinic scheduled today, and there were no scheduled last year. That is still true. However, there should be clinics scheduled this summer, and I believe there will be ample opportunity for you to get into those clinics. So what you can do is do all of that other stuff first, and then you can still kind of participate and help your team out as if you're a level 2 until you attend the ride leading coaches clinic, which will be coming up in the summer. And then to be a level 3 coach, again, do all that same stuff as you had to do as a level 2. You have to do a little bit more hours than a level 2. We expect you to be a little bit more experienced, and then attend a basic mountain biking skills coaches clinic. That's again a little bit more advanced than the ride guide clinic. And I'm not going to repeat it, but you can go to full details to the website, and registration is open. You may have noticed in red, we did reduce the hours required for 2021. So with level 2, it's 20 hours, and level 3 is 40 hours. That's because in 2020, we started the season late. A lot of the teams did, or didn't operate at all. And so we wanted to be mindful of that and allow our coaches to still renew their level without, if they had a little bit fewer hours from the year prior. So I mentioned it before, but you can report your hours at miscabike.org/hours. If you have hours from the previous year, there is an Excel file you can download as a template, and then you can just email us the template. So you don't have to necessarily fill out that form 20 times for every week you rode with the team now. That would take a long time. But if you just download the Excel file, you can fill it out, copy paste it very easily, and then email it to us at registration@miscabike.org. And that will speed up your process for reporting your hours. But if you go to miscabike.org/hours, there's a form there, scroll to the bottom, and then you can download the Excel file. Okay, so this is on the miscabike.org/coach website, and it goes through those same requirements I just listed, so you don't have to remember them or rewatch this. You can just go to this table and see kind of what's required to be the different levels. And then once you are those levels, this slide kind of shows what you're allowed to do with the students. So a level 1 can definitely ride with the team. Typically, you're going to be like a sweep on a group ride, and you have to be a level 2 coach to actually lead that ride. So each group should have a ride leader in it. It doesn't mean you necessarily ride at the front of the pack, but it means that you are the adult leader for that group. You're in charge of that group, and all the coaches that are with you should be following your lead with that group. Once you're a level 3 coach, that's when you can start teaching skills to the riders. So, how to do braking and handling and cornering and what ride ready position is and all that stuff. You will do that as a level 3 coach. And basically, level 3 coaches also are head coaches of the teams. It doesn't mean that every level 3 coach is a head coach, but our head coaches should be level 3 coaches. We do honor certifications by other organizations. So if you already have like a BICP or a NICA or a PMBI certification, we will take that and waive some of our in-person requirements. But we always require first aid CPR to stay maintained. And the on the bike rider ratio again is important. So 1 coach to 6 riders. And if you're doing like off the bike coaching skills, those kinds of things, you can have a few more riders in your group. And that would be a 1 to 8 ratio. We also, there should be 2 coaches at all times with any group. So when we say 1 to 6, it's really a 2 to 12 or 2 to 6 ratio. Because anytime a coach is with the students, we want to have at least 2 coaches there. We know that's not always possible, but every group should have at least 2 coaches. And then, if there's ever a need, at least keeping a group of people together and not being alone. Okay, so then you're probably not a student on this call, but if you are, or if you're trying to figure out how to grow your team or to get your rider signed up, this would be how. So you register with MiSCA annually, and again, registration is open. It's $50 annually to join MiSCA, and that gets you to join your team typically, but also just it funds MiSCA as a league. So I mentioned all of that stuff that we do with teams and coaches and trainings and all that kind of stuff, and frankly, me having me around all year long, that $50 funds us as an organization for the entire year, not just during the race season. You can, once you're a team or if you're interested in joining a team, you would go to miscabike.org/teams. Again, it's optional to join a team, but highly encouraged. It's way more fun if you can ride all year with MiSCA as opposed to just on race day. And now our process really is that you go to miscabike.org/teams, figure out what team you're going to join first, reach out to that head coach and get a participation code. Because right now we are requiring participation codes because some of the teams just got a little too large to be able to manage. And so they are requiring, they're limiting how many people can join the team. And so you'll have to reach out to get a code from them. Most teams aren't like that. So, but if you're interested in joining, you should reach out to them now just in case they could fill up at some point. And then if you're an independent rider where there is no team in your area, you can reach out to registration@miscabike.org and then we'll give you the code. Just don't join a team when you're asked that question. We do understand that $50 is $50, and if that $50 and you have, especially if you have more than 1 kid, that could add up. And so if cost is ever an issue with you, please fill out the application at miscabike.org/scholarship. And financial aid is available. We waived about $10,000 in fees in 2020. That includes discounts for like first-year riders, but definitely if there's ever a cost constraint to your kids' riding bikes, please reach out to us. Even if it's finding a bike or a helmet or whatever, we can help you find other organizations or our bike shop partners that can help you with that. Okay, so some initiatives that we have other than just joining a team or racing, we have some other things that we're doing as MiSCA this year. And these typically update and kind of get refreshed each year. One of the ones that I'm most excited about is the Brave program. This is the tagline is Girls Epic Adventures. And Brave stands for Bold, Resilient, Adventurous, Vibrant, Empowered. It's an adventure club for girls. It's going to be this summer. I didn't put the schedule here. I wish I would have. I apologize for that. But it's made for girls ages 12 and up, which means you'll be turning 12 by the end of this year. So if you're going to be 11, but your birthday's in December, then that's okay. You can still join. It's definitely non-competitive, and it's just focused on having fun and adventure and really just building a community around female participation in MiSCA. We're definitely looking for coaches still for that as well, female coaches. And if you register to sign up for 4 of the 6 events that are happening, then you actually get a free jersey as well, one of our Brave jerseys. Again, you don't have to join a team to join Brave or to participate in that. And it's open to all female MiSCA students, obviously ages 12 and up. Registration for that opens in 2 days, April 1st. So feel free to jump over to miscabike.org/register when registration opens. I did hear somebody unmute. So if you do have your phone, yep, there we go. Okay, another program I'm excited about, it's brand new, is our MiSCA Devo program. This is really focused on kind of our elite level varsity athletes. It will have on and off the bike activities. So we have a webinar, I think it's tomorrow, with a collegiate athlete who's going to kind of share some of her expertise as a prior MiSCA state champion and now a student athlete at in the collegiate level, of kind of how she got there and what the experience is like. More advanced coaching, nutrition counseling, going through different technology that advanced riders use, and then keeping track of training logs, and also kind of the on the bike stuff will be getting these faster student riders together so that they can ride together and push each other and have more riders to ride with at their skill level. A lot of times each team has one or two riders that might be, of this level. And it's hard for them to really ride with other people. Even the coaches aren't always at their level. And so this is made to, like, maybe they'll meet up, one or two times a month just to kind of, in a social environment, or maybe they become friends and they might meet up more often. It just depends on, how that works out. But the idea, again, is to build community around these different groups of riders. We have a student leadership council. Right now, this is a little bit on hold with COVID. It was hard to organize in-person events. And so it kind of lapsed last year. But we're not really pushing it yet for this year. So there is no application to join yet, but the program does exist and we're working on it. And right now it's a little bit more informal. So you may see, we'll reach out to coaches to say, hey, if you have anybody that wants to do this activity, we're looking for volunteers. But basically the idea is to get more students involved with communication and marketing, to work with on trail days and trail stewardship, and also to help us with our programming and skills development. So to get input at the youth level for all of the stuff that we do is really the idea for student leadership, and then to also tap their expertise for things like social media that they're really good at, and then get them exposed to really working in the environment and developing a appreciation for what it takes to maintain your local trail system. And then something that we wanted to do last year that we were not able to do due to COVID is our Sprockets training. So this year, what we're doing is we're going to do a day and a half of normal Sprockets training and a half of a day on how to teach. So it's a train the trainer training as opposed to just a Sprockets training. And what this is for is 1 to 2 coaches per team, plus some MiSCA staff that are going to go through this train the trainer session in May. And the idea is that these coaches and MiSCA staff will then be able to facilitate clinics in their area. So instead of having one MiSCA person who travels around the state and does, maybe 12 clinics a year, we should have about 25 people that will be ready to go, hit the ground running, and they're already part of your team. So each team should be scheduling 1 or 2 clinics throughout the summer, probably each month, to be able to get all of their coaches trained up. And we should be able to see a pretty big increase in our level 2 coach attainment. And even if you don't want to be a level 2 coach, maybe you just go through the training so that you can have a better appreciation for some of the different skills and ways that you can help the riders on the trail. All right, a little bit about some of our current teams. We have 2 different team types. So we have a Scholastic team and a composite team. Scholastic teams are school-based. So like Brighton area schools, Brighton High School, Northville High School, Huron Valley Schools, Lake Orion. Those are all of our kind of Scholastic teams. Detroit Country Day. We had Brandon schools, they moved to composite, but the idea is that you're associated with the school and that you can only field riders that go to your school. So that's why it's a separate bucket, because we understand composite teams can pull from every school, maybe the best rider from every school if there's no team at their school. And so the Scholastic teams typically don't compete against composite. And this year, going into this year, one of our changes is that they now will not be competing at all at the team level against each other. The riders on the team still compete individually against each other, but as a team, they won't be in competition on race day anymore. And then composite teams is what I just mentioned. You can have riders from anybody in the area join a team. Now, when we classify our Scholastic teams, we don't take into account elementary and middle school. We understand that would be a pretty hard thing to do, in that, pretty much a district will have probably 2 to 3 times as many middle schools as they do high schools, and probably 6 times as many elementary schools as they have high schools. And so it just doesn't make sense that you're going to be able to field an entire team out of one of those areas. So elementary and middle school are considered composite all the time. So we don't worry about their school affiliation at all, whether it's in the district or not. And a Scholastic team, so like a Brighton or Lake Orion, can definitely have an elementary and middle school team. We just don't look at what schools the kids go to. So oftentimes they'll bring kids from outside of the district or outside of their schools to join their elementary and middle school teams, just because they're the team in the area. And oftentimes there's not another team for those kids to join. So that's great. So this is a quick snapshot of where our teams are, or I should say where teams and clubs are. Just to point out, the gray bikes are not necessarily official MiSCA teams or clubs, but there are clubs where there are, there are places where clubs exist. And we definitely have racers that belong to those clubs, but they're just not MiSCA teams. They're not certified or official teams. The red bikes on here are what we call our composite teams, which I mentioned. And then the gray kind of the 2 people on the circles are these Scholastic teams. So we have 2 questions come in. Greg asked if we referenced a change in how Scholastic and composite teams will compete. I have not addressed that yet. It's coming up later, so don't worry about that. And then TJ asked, does MiSCA still require a student of a particular school to join that school's team and not be able to join a out-of-district team? That is correct. So if a Brighton High School athlete wanted to join Orange Crush, for example, we don't allow that because Brighton area schools has a Scholastic team. So we require, if you go to that school and you want to join a team, then you have to join your school's team. So if your school has a team, then you're required to join it. You don't have to join a team. So that is also an option. You can ride as an independent racer and wear whatever jersey you want on race day. So that's also possible. But you cannot score for team points for any other team other than your school, if your school has a team. So this map shows kind of where our teams are at today. And this next one shows where our riders are at, which is the first time I really put everybody into one map. And it was kind of fun to do that. But you can kind of see how spread out we are. And basically, where there is a team, there will be riders. There will be, they fall hand in hand, right? But what I kind of want to point out is that I really want to point out 2 dots, really. This one right here is the Midland Mountain Bike Crew. A little shout out to them. This team didn't exist until last year, and now there are all these dots, right? So when you build a team, riders will come to it, and you will get more riders riding bikes that never rode bikes before, and that's awesome, and that's really what we want to do. So really building and growing teams is really what we want to focus on. And I use the words teams and clubs interchangeably. Just because I use the word team doesn't mean it has to be competitive. It can be totally fun, adventure-based, doesn't have to be racing at all. It's just, that's the term that we use for a group of kids and coaches that ride together, is typically a team. But that's super cool that, a team can sprout up in the middle with no other teams around, and all of a sudden you'll get all these riders that join MiSCA. And if you zoom into this, there's way more than what that looks like. They're just too close together. So Google doesn't, pinpoint the dots exactly. I think they had over 50 riders in their first year. It was really awesome. And I would say the same thing with like the West Michigan Coyotes. Once we had an official team kind of sprout up in the area, that area really grew with the number of kids that were served. And when they started elementary programming as well, again, tons more riders were able to have access to mountain biking. So here's a list real quick of composite teams that we have and our Scholastic teams. If you don't see your school on here or the team that you think you belong to, let us know or maybe let your coaches know that you're not seeing it. And that's probably just because they haven't signed up yet. We do have a question about, is there a way to connect with other riders in the area? So right now there isn't necessarily a way. This is from Hugo. So I know Hugo's in the Kalamazoo area. So we can see there is a little bit of, a culmination in the area of Kalamazoo. So what I would say is, Hugo, if you could email me, and what I'll do is I can start like a thread, like a group email of all the riders within maybe a 25-mile radius of you. And just get you guys all talking, because maybe you can start, a Kalamazoo area youth cycling club or something like that. Okay. All right. So now is where we kind of cover the kind of new rules to MiSCA, what has changed year over year. It is definitely not all encompassing of the entire rule book. So please, if you're new, visit miscabike.org/MiSCA rules. We kind of did that on purpose. But if you go to miscabike.org/MiSCA rules, you'll get the full requirements and racing rules for MiSCA. And there were quite a few changes this year in general that I'm not going to cover. I kind of cover them loosely with a bullet point. So even if you are familiar to MiSCA, I would recommend you just kind of browse through it just to make sure that you're clear on what has changed. And I'll touch on that in a moment, but I recommend that everybody looks through it. It's our responsibility as coaches and parents to ensure our students understand the rules. We definitely know that even a high school level student is probably not going to read through this rule book, and our younger student athletes are not going to understand the words that are in it. It uses somewhat quite official language, and that's not always the easiest to read for a 10-year-old. So definitely make sure that you understand the rules so that you can pass those along. Typically, most of it is common sense. It'll just be simple things like, make sure you're wearing a helmet and you can't have a kickstand on your bike, and things like that you want to make sure that it's clear that all the kids know that whenever they're on a bike, they're wearing a helmet, and not to leave the trail, and what to do if your bike breaks down, and those kinds of things. Okay, let's see. Did I have a question about, will online CPR and first aid training be allowed this year due to COVID? We did announce this in the newsletter yesterday, that the in-person first aid will still be required. However, if you belong to a team and you have a lot of coaches on your team that have the in-person certification, we will keep that in account if you request a waiver for the in-person portion of the first aid CPR. You still have to do the online one, but we will, if you're on a big team that has 100 coaches and 50 have gone through first aid CPR in person, then we'll probably consider your request to do online only. The in-person is opening up now, so you should be able to find an in-person class pretty easily, whereas last year that was impossible to find, which is really the reason why we had the loosening of our requirement last year. We understand some people are still hesitant to do an in-person training, so that would be a good reason to ask for a waiver. If you have not been vaccinated yet and you don't feel comfortable attending an in-person session, then for sure reach out and ask for a waiver on that. Okay, so let's run through these changes. If you have questions, please type them into the box, because I'll try to go through them quickly, but I am trying to address them in a way that everybody would understand. I went through this with the coaches in a coaching call last month, and so they should be somewhat abreast of the changes, but here we go. So the first change is that riders must choose a team prior to their first race. This only applies to composite racers, because the Scholastic team people can't choose their team. They have to choose the school they go to. So let's say I didn't know there was a team at my school, and I show up to the first race, and then I race, and then I'm like, oh, I guess I could join the Brighton team now. We would let you do that. However, if you show up to a race, and you compete in that race, and then another team wants to kind of recruit you to be on their team, for that, we don't allow you to join that team during that year. So that it just has to be prior to your first race. The rider has to join a team. We added elementary team awards for this year. It's going to be the same general rules as the composite middle school, which I kind of already blew the idea of on an earlier slide. But this will be our first year awarding elementary teams with awards. The elementary category has blown up in the last few years, and typically at a race we'll have about 100 or more elementary riders. So the demand is definitely there. And it definitely justifies having an elementary category for our team awards now. We're also going to split our Scholastic teams based on size of the team, as far as during the race competition and also for series awards. And when I say this, any kind of splitting at the team level is just for team level awards. So it's not necessarily for individual awards. So when you're a varsity rider, you race against every varsity rider. It doesn't matter what school they go to or what team they're on. You're hopeful to win that race. And then based on your points in that race, you score points for your team that you belong to. Then all those team points pooled together, the teams compete against each other. And then based on that is where we will define who the winner is of those different team levels. I believe the next slide goes through all of the different team styles, which will answer one of the questions that came up earlier. Lisa asked if you can join a Scholastic team if your school doesn't have a team. So Scholastic teams by definition are only members of their school. So if, let's say I go to Heartland, as a great example of I'm seeing the chat, right? If I go to Heartland and I want to join the Brighton team, I can do that. I can practice with the Brighton team, but I cannot score points with the Brighton team. Also, just as a note, Brighton does not have to let me join their team if they don't want to. And that, teams can only be a certain size. And if they have enough kids from their school in the team, then they probably wouldn't let you. Or for example, like Detroit Country Day, I don't think that they let kids from outside of their school join their team. And that's just not just an open team. Most of the Scholastic teams, though, will let you practice with them and join their team and be like just part of the family with a kit and everything, as long as you join their team and go through their, and follow their rules. You just on race day will not be considered for team award points. Okay, and then this is the kind of one of the other bigger changes when it comes to team awards, is that at every race, we will award every single style of team. In prior years, we would give one award for high school and one award for middle school. But because we're splitting up the divisions of Scholastic and we're trying to make it kind of more fair for smaller teams to be competitive and to grow and to enjoy success, that's why we're creating the Division 1 and Division 2 for Scholastic. But we also wanted to recognize that at every race and not have a small team competing against a very large team, let's say. So at every race, we'll have 5 different team awards to give out. And then at the end of the year, there'll be a state champion in all 5 of these kind of divisions of team. We are adding an advanced elementary category, which is on a future slide, but part of just the general change of the rules is that we had to add advanced elementary into our points structure. Advanced elementary athletes will score the same points as a middle school novice rider. They will likely be doing the same exact course as a middle school novice rider. And it just made sense with the way that elementary points go from 50 to 60, that 70 was kind of the natural progression for advanced. Okay, and this is that slide that I mentioned that was just kind of a bulleted list of a lot of other things that changed in the rules that I ask if you are even a seasoned coach to please read through and just make sure you understand what has changed. One thing that we did is we changed the word guidelines to requirements. We just wanted to be clear that these are rules that need to be followed, not suggestions of how to act. And so for that, we just changed the word to make it more clear that you are required to follow these rules when you participate with MiSCA. We specified rules for adults with appropriate penalties. In the past, we didn't always have, we require everyone to wear a helmet at all times, but we don't say what the penalty is for an adult for not riding with a helmet. So we wanted to be clear on that about what the penalties could be for an adult that doesn't follow the rules. We added a banned substances list. We added our concussion policy, our discrimination policy. We clarified what is meant by abusive behavior. So things like bullying or sexual harassment could also be abusive, other than, maybe the more extreme abusive behavior that, you could think of. We clarified what our prohibition is of adult product logos on apparel. We clarified and updated many of our rules and the associated penalties. So basically, we defined, okay, why do we have this rule? If it's for a safety reason, then we took that rule way more seriously, that we would likely not let a racer participate in a race if they were not following a safety rule, which means that you could be disqualified if you don't fix whatever's wrong. And there are other rules that were just more of like, well, it's not necessarily a safety issue. Maybe you got an advantage in the race, which could be a big deal. Or maybe it was just something small that might not be a safety issue, but it's definitely a rule of ours. So you'll notice that those penalties have changed and the wording has changed to fall in line with that. We also added wording for a time trial format because we plan to continue to do time trials, hopefully on our own, as we deem we want to do it, or as a trail deems necessary, but not due to COVID, hopefully. Last year, all of our races were time trials because that's how we had to separate our riders to make it a safe event. Some people enjoy time trial format, and it's a format that races do in general often. And so we'll likely introduce 1 or 2 time trials a year into our format as well. So we just added that into the rules just so that it was clear of what that process is for time trials. And then there are some more changes around categories as well. So we added advanced elementary. Advanced elementary is for all elementary grades. So anybody grades 5 and under can join the advanced elementary group. They're probably going to do 2 to 3 beginner laps, which is 1 more lap than the upper elementary would normally do. We have a lot of elementary riders that were kind of getting done with their race very quickly. And so we want to encourage them to move up, but racing against middle schoolers didn't really seem fair or something that they really wanted to do. And it might not have been the right thing to do in general. So adding this advanced elementary category will hopefully give somewhere for those really fast riders to go that are likely going to move up really fast into a more advanced category as soon as they're out of elementary. We're clarifying the naming of our middle school categories, and then also splitting the middle school male 6 and 7 category that we started in 2019. So before we had 3 categories, now we'll have 4 for middle school, and we're renaming them just to be novice. So before there was a high school novice category, and now, and there was just a middle school. It didn't say novice, but there was a middle school advanced. So it's kind of confusing a little bit. If you're the middle school state champion, it seems like you'd be the state champion for all of middle school. However, the middle school advanced riders are actually more advanced, and they earn more points at a race. So it's just more clear now that there are 2 levels of middle school. There's a novice level and an advanced, and also because everything is really grade based, we don't really need the word middle school in there anymore. So now there's a novice category for females, 6th through 8th grade, and then there is a novice male category for each of the grades of middle school. There's a question in the chat box about if you have to attend all of the practices for Scholastic teams. That is a rule at the Scholastic level. So you'd have to reach out to the coach to ask that question. That could be a reason why you might not want to join the team, but you could still participate with MiSCA as an independent racer and just race on your own. I would say typically all teams have some kind of attendance requirement. Maybe not composite teams, but some of the composite teams do as well. But most of the Scholastic teams, I think, have some kind of attendance requirement. And if not, it's a requirement for like getting a varsity letter or being recognized, as part of, as more of an award for participation. Before, we allowed racers and parents to choose their own category when they registered. You would choose a category when you register annually. We would use that for your series. And then you would also choose a category when you registered a race. The only reason why we really cared about that category at the race registration was because we charge a different rate for different categories for races, which is really typical for mountain bike racing. Not very typical, I don't think, in scholastic sports in general, but we all came from mountain bike racing, and so that's kind of what we follow and what we're used to. And that was the normal. In 2021, the coaches will actually choose the category for their racers, preferably by August 1st, and then any changes after that have to be completed before the race. The Thursday before each race is basically the registration deadline. So those will be the categories that we pull from the system to use for racing. And I'll cover what those categories are in a little bit. Any upgrades after that August 1st date have to be approved by the coach. And that process is defined by each team. So some teams will have it where the head coach has to approve it. Others might require, your ride guide to approve it or something like that. But either way, it'll go through the team. And then we also added a rider group drop down into SportsSignUp that the coaches can use. It's optional, but it'll allow the coaches to put in, like, if you're A group, B group, green, yellow, red, whatever your team uses to group out your riders, they can use that, so that way it can be pulled from SportsSignUp for the purposes of team management as opposed to just for racing. Yep, and one of the questions was if parents of independent riders will make the decision for their children. Yes, they will. Our goal is to, probably by the end of May at the latest, is to provide a list of all of the riders from the previous year and what level we think they should be in for the following year. So if they performed very well, we would think that they might move up to the next category, and depending on the category, how many riders are in it, that kind of thing. Or they may default to a grade-based category. So like if you're a middle school 6th grader last year, and you're kind of middle of the pack, we'd expect you would be middle school 7th grade this year. And that would be required that you'd have to move up to 7th grade, because assuming that you're moving up a grade level every year. We wouldn't force you to move up to like middle school advanced, but we may recommend you to move up to middle school advanced if you're of a certain level. And you may be required to move up to middle school advanced if you won the middle school category the prior year. So those rules are all in the MiSCA rulebook. There was another question about average ride length. I think that's the ride length for the clubs or for the teams at practices. I don't know precisely, but they're between an hour and 2 hours, I would say. Depending on the team and weather and how dark it gets at the end of the year. I think that's safe to say. It's definitely going to be at least an hour. It'll probably be less than 2 hours. Okay. Another question was about if coaches choose a category, how do parents know what to register their rider as? So you will not put a category into MiSCA at all for your riders anymore. The coaches will enter them. So the parents will not choose what category anymore in SportsSignUp. It's all coach driven. So you can register for the annual. There's no drop-down list for what category to join. And then when you register for races, there will not be a choice for what category. And I'll cover that in a moment too. Okay, so here are the different categories for high school. We have 20 total categories now altogether. That is crazy to me. We had 7, I believe, when I started, and now we have 20. And so it's awesome to see that as we've grown, we've been able to kind of split up and make things fair so that everybody has a place to be competitive. So no changes really here on high school at all. We have varsity, junior varsity, and then novice. We do split junior varsity and novice differently for males versus females, and that's just because of how many riders are in those categories. We don't want them to be too huge. Does somebody have a question, or if you don't, if you could please just make sure you're muted. Okay, and then for middle school, we have these 6 different categories. We just kind of covered what those are, but we do have an advanced middle school for males and females, and then we have novice, which is split as I noted on the prior slide. For elementary, we have this new advanced elementary category, which is for all ages of elementary. And then we have that split for sure by male and female. And we have our upper elementary and lower elementary categories as well. Now, in these slides, it mentions grades. Those are sometimes are suggestions, other times are required. So for example, like novice for 9th grade, we don't allow anybody under 9th grade to join this category. It's only for 9th graders that are basically new to mountain biking. And that's like that is what it is. You have to be 9th grade to join it. For varsity, we don't care how old you are. You can join varsity as long as your coach agrees with that and your parent wants you to be in that category. Then technically you could be a 6th grader and join varsity. That's fine. Again, I can hear somebody is not on mute. If you could mute your line, just double check just to make sure. Looks like it's Keith. If you could mute your line, that would be great. Thank you. Oh yeah, the reason why I mentioned that was because with elementary categories, you can be in 3rd grade, let's say, and you can move up to upper elementary if you'd like to be a little bit more competitive, do an extra lap, you can do that. Or you can move all the way up to advanced elementary if you feel that you'd rather do that. That would be probably 2 more laps than your lower elementary, but we have some fast lower elementary riders who are young and could be in that category for 2 or 3 years if they never move up. So it's always recommended that, if you're a leader, likely you should move up at least 1 category. And now this new advanced elementary category will be really great for those riders who, drive 2 hours and race for 15 minutes. We did have a question about how does an independent rider new to MiSCA select their rider category. So in the rule book, there are examples of kind of the length of a race and kind of what the expectations are for each of these categories. So like for a varsity racer, we expect you to have a couple years of racing experience and to be able to kind of race at race pace for like an hour and a half. So if that fits you, then you might want to sign up for that category. But every category will kind of have some of those expectations of different rider levels. By default, you would race in the category of your age or your grade. So again, if you're like a 6th grade boy coming in for the first time, I would say you're probably going to be racing novice male 6th grade. However, if this is your first time to MiSCA, but you've been racing for years, then maybe you should go to advanced middle school. And you would figure that out by looking at that in the rules. And then what we would do is we would reach out to you to ask you what category you want to be, and we would select that category for you in SportsSignUp. All right, so let's move into our race schedule and fees. So our race schedule is finalized now. Last month it was not finalized. We had a little bit of a hiccup at Brighton Rec area. So October 10th now is finalized as Milford Trail, which is kind of like the new announcement if you've been keeping up. Our race schedule is August 29th. We always do them on Sundays. So our first race is our opener at August 29th at Heritage Park. That's in Adrian, so it's a little bit further south than we've ever done a race. But there's a new team down there and a great trail system that will really be really great for our teams. September 12th is the well-known Addison Oaks. We've had an Addison Oaks race since 2011, I believe. That Addison Oaks has been part of our race series. And we started doing our own races there in 2016, I believe it was. Yeah, maybe 15. This should be Merrill Trail, not Merrill Park, on September 19th. That's on the west side of the state near Grand Rapids. On September 26th is Bloomer Park. On October 10th is Milford Trail, like I mentioned, and October 17th is Cannonsburg Ski Area. I do want to give a shout out to Cyclotherapy, Fraser Bicycle, Wheels in Motion, and Hammerhead Bikes of Howell, who are sponsoring those 4 races that their name is listed by. Without their support, it really helps, and it really keeps our costs down for our teams and our riders. A lot of other leagues around the country, we kind of keep up with what they do, and their fees are typically about twice as much as the MiSCA fees are for their races. So we kind of pride ourselves on being able to keep our fees low while providing the same level of professionalism. And then if you're new, the last race of the year is our championship race, and that's where we actually give out our series awards. So based on those 6 race results, we keep track throughout the entire year and publish those results. And we will award whoever our top 3 finalists are for the year at the last race. So here are our fees for racing. And this is the difference for this year is the simplified race registration and the fee that goes along with it. So now all high schoolers pay the same fee. It's typically going to be $25 per race. All middle schoolers pay the same fee. It's $20 per race, and elementary pays $15. It doesn't matter what group you're in inside of those grade levels, or even if you're a middle schooler racing varsity, you still just pay the middle school rate. So again, we're not going to ask you what category you are at all in the MiSCA registration system. That does not define how much you pay. It just is based on what grade you're in. What's really nice about this is if you are let's say you sign up as novice, or your coach puts you in novice, but then you're crazy fast on the first race, you win, and you're like, hey, I should be JV. You can move up to junior varsity, and there would be no extra cost. We wouldn't, have to do anything. We just have to change that toggle in the system, and you will automatically be upgraded with no extra to-dos as far as the registration system goes. If you want to hold out and wait until 2 weeks before the race or the week of the race to register, you can do that, but it's going to cost a little bit more. It's $10 extra if you kind of want to wait it out. So you can see the price goes up there. And then if you want to register for the entire series, which is pretty common, and a lot of our riders do that, you can do that up front. And so instead of having to register 6 separate times for each individual race, you can just do it once, and you'll be registered automatically for all 6 races. It's the same price you would pay as if you registered 2 weeks prior to a race. So for high school, it's $150, which is 25 times 6. But you do get a free t-shirt if you register for the full series. And it changes every year. There's a interesting design on the front, and then all the race venues will be on the back. Something new this year is that we are going to open high school race registration earlier than middle school and elementary. This is really just because we understand that high school student athletes, and I'm using that word because that's at the high school level, that's typically what they are at that point because it's a scholastic sport. Oftentimes those riders have to have additional participation in order to earn varsity letters or to be recognized for like USA cycling points or even moving on to college. They have to have that experience in the races. And also, frankly, they have limited time to be able to get that experience. And so we are letting the high schoolers register early. And that is just in case we have to impose any participation limits this year, that they have a chance to get in first. So we're expecting the serious riders will register in May. And then kind of the more riders that are more, might want to do 1 or 2 races or just a few races are going to wait until June, July to sign up as they normally would. Everyone else will open up in June. Also, just to kind of make it clear, in the May 1st registration date is only for the full series registration for high school. Again, the purpose of it is because we understand that a lot of high school racers need participation in order to qualify for, varsity level and other things. Okay, so one thing you may have noticed on that previous slide is that if you're very familiar, the race registration timeline and availability has changed. So in 2020, the $10 discount per race was on the Monday before every race. So you had kind of a while to wait. So you could race, and then the next day after a race, you could register for the next race, because typically it's every week. That deadline has been moved up. So now you have to register 2 weeks early before race day to get that $10 discount. Online registration will still close on the Thursday before race day. So you do have time to register late if you need to. And then prior to COVID, we used to allow riders to register on race day. So you could just show up on race day, never having doing anything with MiSCA before, and we would let you register to race and do your annual registration on the spot. That won't be allowed in 2021 and likely never again. So there will be no same day registration for racing. So you have to definitely make sure you register online the Thursday before race day. If you have any issues with the registration system, we can typically help you through that. And we'll work with you for any issues that you might have, but there will be no same day registration. With how many racers we have, it's just, it's too much to manage. And then some changes for 2020 also for the race day format. This is a little bit of news for those who don't know, but in 2019, we always did mass start formats. That means that you have like, maybe 20 to 40 kids all start at the same time. We say go, and they all go all at the same time. We would do one giant awards podium at the end of the day for our 17 or so categories, which took a very long time, and also required everybody to kind of wait around until the end of the day to do that awards celebration. Some people had to leave and don't get to do the podium, which is a bummer. And some teams aren't even able to stay because they have a bus or something like that where they have to get back to their school. So in 2020, I thought it was important to show 2019 of how it changed. But in 2020, the before is every race was a time trial format, which means every racer gets their own time for what time they're going to start, and they all line up at the start line, and only one rider takes off at a given interval. Most races are less than a minute, but last year we did 1 minute intervals because we were trying to keep distance on the trail and avoid congestion in the trails to avoid any COVID exposure. And we did no awards podiums in person last year. This year, the after is that most races will be back to that mass start format that everybody loves. And some people do love the time trial format though. So Milford is still planned to be a time trial. And in the future, we will likely sprinkle in time trials here and there as different trail systems lend themselves to time trials more than others. And there are, and again, some racers perform better at a time trial than at a mass start. And so it kind of allows for a different level of competition and for different racers to shine on different days. Really kind of the new thing from 2019 here is that we are planning to do 3 different awards podiums throughout the day. It doesn't mean it'll be elementary, middle school, high school. It'll probably be based on rider group. So there will likely be an elementary, at least like a lower and upper, and then maybe a middle school and elementary advanced, and then or in high school novice, and then it'll be JV varsity together at the end. Still figuring out how we do team awards with that, but that is kind of the idea, that we would have multiple awards podiums throughout the day. And that is because we were just getting too big to manage having everybody stay for the entire day. So this year we're planning on averaging around 500 racers for the day. Back when we had 350 racers for a day, we would max out around a little over 400 racers. And parking lot congestion in general gets to be crazy. Also, trail congestion gets to be a challenge. So this year we're spreading our day out. I didn't put that in here, but our days will be about the same length as they were in 2020. So like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we'll have multiple awards podiums, so you don't have to stay the entire day. But hopefully what that does is it allows the trails to be less congested because we can spread the rider groups out more. And then also allows us to free up parking spaces as people will come and go throughout the day, as opposed to staying around for the entire 8-hour race. Okay, we do have a question about COVID in general. So most of the younger kids will still not be vaccinated this summer. Why are we going back to mass start races this year? So, so we may still have COVID requirements, and depending on where we're at that point in the year, and depending on the guidance that is happening, it's possible that we could still be doing time trials. However, I believe that even the younger kids will likely, while they won't be vaccinated, I would assume that we'll still be doing time trial, or we'll still be doing mass start races. We may require masks while in the mass start grid. If that is a concern, we'll see when we get to that point in the year. But in general, the riders are not within 6 feet of each other on the trail while they're racing. And so there's typically not a whole lot of interaction with different riders. Only when you're passing a rider will you have the interaction. And I'm not an epidemiologist, but my understanding is that it takes a little bit more exposure than a quick pass, typically, to get enough of a virus to be passed. So I'll leave it there for right now, and we'll hope to have more information and guidance later on. We're definitely following like the USAC guidelines and seeing what they're doing. And they are basically, the idea is that they're back to mass starts, as it's an outdoor sport in an outdoor environment that can be distance for most of the time. Okay, and then I left this slide on for a long time, which is probably a mistake because everyone's probably maybe freaking out about this slide now. These are changes proposed for 2022, and I wanted to give everybody 1 year's notice on this. So in 2021, as the before, and most years before that, we've always had 1-day races, and those races have been on Sundays. A long, long time ago, we did do races on Saturdays, but they were always 1-day races. In 2022, it's very likely that we're going to move to 2-day races, where some categories will race on Saturdays and other categories will race on Sundays. It's important to note that because with a mass start race, everyone has the same start time. There won't be the case where like some varsity racers race on Saturday and others race on Sunday. That's very unlikely to be the case. It'll very likely be that full categories will be split up and racing on the different days. We don't know what that looks like yet, and we're going to take a lot of things into account when deciding on who races when. But I do know that a lot of other school sports are on Saturdays, and so I'm just assuming that the older categories will race on Sundays. Throwing that out there now with what I believe would be likely. Again, that's for 2022, not for this upcoming fall. And again, we don't want to limit participation at the races, and we feel like we are getting too large to limit how much trail congestion we're seeing, and the venues cannot accommodate the number of people that are coming to the races, whether to spectate or to race. And so we're going to have to move to 2 days eventually. It's just a matter of when. It's likely that with the growth that we saw last year and moving into this year, that we should have moved to 2-day races this year. However, that's a lot of change in 1 year. And we felt that we would save that for next year. I'm hoping that we can still keep a good level of this year with the changes that we're planning to make to our race day. Okay, well, that takes me into COVID precautions. And so right now, this is kind of it as far as what MiSCA's guidance is for our clubs and teams participating during this time. So MiSCA teams and clubs must follow current state and local orders and guidance. You can view those at michigan.gov/coronavirus. There is a lot going on right now around youth sports and athletics in general. So you definitely should review those guidelines. The gist is that starting April 2nd, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services requires all athletes ages 13 to 19 to be tested for coronavirus on a weekly basis. This is a pretty big deal. We anticipate there will be changes and clarification, especially for non-contact outdoor sports, before most teams actually start riding in May. So we will see. I'm sure that MHSAA is working with the MDHHS now on trying to clarify, how I'm trying to think of a non-contact sport, but like how maybe, I don't know, I can't think of one right now, but anyways, how a sport that has close contact indoors but might not be a full contact sport is different than a non-contact outdoor sport where you have no interaction physically with another participant in that sport, like cross-country running or mountain biking. Typically, we look at cross-country running with the MHSAA guidelines, and we try to follow that because it most closely mirrors our environment as cyclists. TJ said tennis as a good example of an outdoor sport where they are currently under these same guidelines to be tested weekly, even though they have no, they're way further apart than even we are on mountain bikes, but they still require that same level of testing. And then, so we're planning on releasing specific guidance for our teams by May 1st. If that testing guidance is still, or the testing is required, then we will have guidance on how to accomplish that. It doesn't mean that MiSCA is going to provide tests or get into the testing environment, but it would be that we would, tell our teams how to ensure a test was done and where to store that result and those kinds of things. We definitely believe all teams should be taking attendance now every race and making sure that you understand what ride group every rider was riding in on every day that they were riding. So that way, if you do get word of a positive test, that we can contract trace that back to the riders of any ride group. And again, by May 1st, when most of the teams start riding, we'll have something in place that will help you accomplish those things. All right. Volunteers, so that we always have a call for volunteers. We depend on the support of volunteers on race day and throughout the year for our coaches. But on race day, we definitely have volunteer needs that require a lot of people all at once. And so it's an all hands on deck approach. Specifically, course marking and helping us set up our start finish area. We always need help with that. And that's both a Saturday and a Sunday task. So on Saturdays, it usually takes a couple hours to set our infield up for our start finish area. And then on Sundays, it's more of a kind of a cleanup and a prepping to get our tents set up and blow up our arches and things like that. And that usually takes like an hour on Sunday mornings to get all set up. We anticipate we'll need more help this year with parking and traffic control. So just helping people with road closures that might be in place or different parking spots that are closed in general for local venues. You can help with that and make sure that there's a smooth transition of traffic. We always need course marshals. This is kind of our biggest ask on race day because it requires kind of the most amount of time all at one time. And it also requires kind of the right person to be there. Often you need to have a bike to get to the course marshal location, but you'll be out on the trail somewhere, making sure that, either a rider doesn't cut a area of the course or that we have somebody at an area of the course that may be more dangerous or risky, or at a spot where there might be, where a rider has to choose a route to go, whether they're taking like a beginner or a more advanced course. Typically we'll have a course marshal in those areas. So that way we can catch riders going the wrong way, or somebody's available if they need to ask which way they need to go. And then course cleanup. Typically this is I get on the microphone and just ask people to help out, but definitely you can sign up to help for that too. And there's imagine how long it takes to set it all up. It takes less time to clean it up, but only because we have so many people helping us. And then a race volunteer is not required to hold a coaching certificate. So there is no background check or anything like that we're doing, or we're not asking you to pay the $30 to help us out on race day. Races are quite different than than actively being a coach on a team. So the rules are quite a bit different as well. Okay, so at this point, I want to ask you to please, if you see a logo on here for an organization that's in your area, please support them. They are supporting us and, again, keeping your costs low for your child's participation or for your coaching involvement with MiSCA. And in general, they're keeping us going and motivated and helping us in a lot of other areas other than just financially. So please support our sponsors. If you know of anybody who might want to become a sponsor of MiSCA, please have them reach out to me. Again, my contact info will be on the next couple slides. Real quick, if you want to stay connected throughout the year, the first thing I would do is sign up for our newsletter. You can go to miscabike.org/update to sign up for it. If you sign up in SportsSignUp and your email is in there, we automatically register you for that newsletter. So you should have gotten one yesterday if you're signed up in SportsSignUp. If you didn't get one, then run over to that update link and get signed up so that you are abreast of any new news that comes out. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/MiSCABike, no spaces or anything like that. I recommend you join the MiSCA Moms Facebook group. It's also for coaches and dads too. We just like that name, MiSCA Moms. It's kind of cool. So you can go to facebook.com. If you go to our Facebook page, you can click on groups and it'll be there, but it's /MiSCA group or just search MiSCA Moms and you'll find it on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram as well. Twitter typically has the same content as Facebook, probably less than Facebook has. But Instagram, we want that to be a little bit more visual recap of like race day and what's happening around the league. We just haven't been great about that yet. The difficult as a business page to give more people access because they get more access than you want them to have. So our idea was to give more of the riders access to our Instagram, but that hasn't worked out yet because riders kids don't typically have Facebook, and you have to have Facebook to run an Instagram page. So, all right. So at this point, I want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you so much. I know it was a beautiful day out. I wish I could ride as well. And if you have any additional questions, please type them into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself at this time. I won't yell at you if you unmute now. If you want to email me a question, that's fine too, swarren@miscabike.org. If you have questions about volunteering or want to get more involved, you can email us at volunteer@miscabike.org. Maybe just have general something you want to say, you can email us at board@miscabike.org, and our entire board will receive that message. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box right now. So, and I'm not hearing any voices. So I'll double check to make sure my speaker is up. So I should be able to hear you if you're asking. Awesome. Okay. Well, I thank everybody for the shout outs in the chat, and I appreciate your time again. I know that everybody on this call, other than me, is a volunteer. And so I really appreciate everything the coaches and volunteers do for MiSCA. There wouldn't be a MiSCA without the coaches, and we owe it all to our volunteers. So thank you guys so much. Looking forward to a great year. Fingers crossed that everything works out this year. Get vaccinated, please. So that we can move our state forward and back to as regular as we can get. Thanks again.